All right, let's talk about a corporate battle for the ages. This is a story about a surprise attack, a huge legal gamble, and a decision that, believe it or not, completely rewrote the rules for boardrooms all across America.
So, it all kicked off with this really big idea. You had Time Incorporated, the huge publishing and cable company, and they wanted to join forces with Warner Communications. Their plan? To build this massive global media empire that would be perfectly set up to dominate the 1990s. But just when they thought everything was set, an uninvited guest showed up. And I mean, they really crashed the party. Paramount Communications swoops in with what's called a hostile bid. We're talking an aggressive, all-cash offer that was basically designed to just shatter the Time Warner deal.
So this put Time's board in a really tough spot. I mean, what do you do? Do you take this incredible cash offer for your shareholders? Or do you fight for the long-term vision you've been working on for years? And the big question was, how far could they legally push things to protect their plan? That's exactly what we're going to get into.
Now, this whole story, all the nitty-gritty details, we're pulling from a deep dive analysis in the Florida State University Law Review. It's great because it lays out all the strategies, the courtroom drama, and the ripple effects of the final decision.
Okay, so before we get into the big fight, we really need to understand what Time was fighting for in the first place. Let's take a look at what that original deal was all about.
This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment thing. Time's board had actually been working on this strategy for years. They knew they had to get into video production, to support their big channels like HBO, and Warner was just the perfect partner. But, and this is really important, they also wanted to protect what they called the time culture. It was all about their reputation for journalistic integrity. All right, so March 1989, they make it official. It's a friendly deal, a stock-for-stock merger. Basically, Time shareholders would swap their stock for stock in the new company. Now here's the crucial detail. A deal like this needed shareholder approval, and that big vote, it was set for June 23rd.
And you better believe that date, June 23rd, was circled in bright red on Paramount's calendar. Because this is where the whole story just takes a massive, unexpected turn.
So let's set the scene. It's June 7th, 1989. This is right before all the drama kicks off. A single share of Time stock is going for about $126. Okay? Remember that number, $126. It's going to be super important in a second. And then, bam! With only 2 weeks left before that shareholder vote, Paramount makes its move. This wasn't some friendly, hey, let's talk offer. No, this was a full-on, hostile takeover bid, aimed right at Time's shareholders. And that timing? Oh, that was absolutely deliberate. It was engineered to create as much chaos as possible.
And here's why it was so disruptive. Remember that $126 stock price? Well, Paramount comes in offering $175 a share in cash. That's a huge premium. So if you're a shareholder, what do? You've got this offer of guaranteed cash in your hand right now versus the promise of long-term value from a merger that might or might not pan out.
So you can imagine, Time's board is totally backed into a corner. They genuinely believe their plan with Warner was the right move for the company's future. But they were also terrified that their shareholders would just take the quick cash. Who wouldn't be tempted? So what they did next was pretty radical and unbelievably risky. Okay, so first things first, the board gets together and formally rejects Paramount's offer. They put out a statement saying, nope, this offer's not good enough. They argued that their big plan with Warner was going to create way more value down the road. They were picking their long-term strategy over a quick payday. And this is the wild part. Instead of trying to win over their shareholders, the board just changed the rules of the game. They completely junked the original merger plan, and they restructured the whole thing. Now, instead of merging, Time was going to buy Warner for cash. Why is that so important? Because this new kind of deal didn't need a shareholder vote. They just cut them out of the decision entirely.
But pulling off a move like that, it came with a mind-blowing price tag. To buy Warner, Time had to go into debt for about $10.8 billion. Think about that. The board was basically betting the entire company on their vision, piling on a mountain of debt to make it happen.
So you can probably guess what happened next. Paramount didn't just say, oh well, and go home. They sued. And the case went straight to Delaware's Court of Chancery. That's kind of the Super Bowl of corporate law in the US, because so many big companies are officially based in Delaware. So the stage was set for a huge legal battle. And the arguments from both sides were pretty straightforward. Paramount was basically saying, hey, Time's board is just ignoring its shareholders to save their own skins and push through their pet project. Their only job should be to get the most money for the owners of the company. But Time's lawyers shot back with, whoa, not so fast. A board's job isn't just to grab the highest bid, it's to manage the company for the long haul and protect its core strategy.
Paramount's whole case hinged on this legal concept called the Revlon rule. Think of it like this. The rule says that once a company decides to sell itself, the board's job flips. They're not guardians of a long-term plan anymore, they're more like auctioneers. Their only duty at that point is to get the highest possible price. And Paramount was arguing that by agreeing to the original merger, Time had basically put a for sale sign on the front lawn.
But the court didn't just focus on the Revlon rule. They brought up a different legal standard, something called the Unicol test. And this one's a bit more nuanced. It's not just a simple is the company for sale question, it's more of a framework for figuring out if a board's defensive moves are, actually legitimate. So the Unicol test has two main parts. First, you have to assess the threat. Did the board have good reason to believe that Paramount's offer was a threat to the company's plans? And we're not just talking about the price being too low, but a threat to their whole long-term strategy. The second part is about proportionality. Was their defense, taking on billions in debt and cutting out the shareholders, a reasonable reaction to the threat they identified?
And the Delaware Supreme Court's answer to both of those questions? It was a loud and clear yes. And that decision became absolutely legendary in corporate law. It created what everyone now calls the Paramount precedent.
This quote from the final ruling really sums it all up. The court basically said that the job of managing a company, and that includes setting its long-term strategy, that job belongs to the board of directors, period. It's not something they can just hand off to shareholders, especially when things get crazy during a takeover fight.
I mean, the impact of this ruling was huge. It basically gave boards the power to just say no to a takeover offer. It said, yes, you can choose a long-term plan over a quick buck for shareholders. It established this crazy idea that even a really generous all-cash offer could be seen as a threat, and it okayed the idea of taking on massive debt to defend a strategy. It really highlighted just how important it is to have those independent directors on a board making these tough calls. But this whole thing leaves us with a really big, nagging question, right? In giving boards all this power, the power to turn down a ton of cash and to ignore a shareholder vote, did the court protect brilliant long-term strategy? Or did it just hand corporate boards a shield to protect themselves and their own power, basically insulating them from the people who actually own the company? It's a debate that's still very much alive today.